Welcome, everybody. Today we are here to discuss Bailey's Individualized Education Plan, or better known as an IEP. Before we get started on that, I would just like to thank everybody for coming today to help Bailey, and especially Mr. and Mrs. Spiker. Thank you so much. We really value your time and your suggestions, opinions, anything you might have to offer. We're with your kid every day, but you know him way better than any of us ever will. He's your child. So just thank you very much for coming and giving us your time and attention. And again, before we get started on the draft, I just want to quickly go over, here are the procedural safeguards for special education and IEP meetings and such. Basically, they are just your rights as parents in this process, and it's pretty in-depth. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask any of us. We will gladly answer them for you. Some of them are just like prior written notice, as we have to notify you when we reevaluate and when we conduct meetings. You have a right to confidentiality, access to records, impartial hearing if you want something changed and it's not getting changed, things like that. So in here is an in-depth copy package of all of your rights as parents in this process. So now that we've gone over those things, we will now look at the draft of the IEP. And first, I just want to talk a little bit about eligibility. Bailey was just diagnosed with diabetes, and under the IDEA's 13 categories, diabetes does fall under that, under other health impairments, because it is a chronic condition, so that he does qualify for special education. So on the first page, I handed you guys all copies. On this first page, I would just like you as parents to look over, make sure we got everything correctly. We got it from the school records, but we just want to make sure everything is accurate on here. So on the second page here, we have strengths, educational concerns, and preferences, interests. I talked to Bailey, and he told me that he loves math, history, and science, and he loves reading historical fiction books, which I think is awesome. He also loves playing football and basketball competitively, so he does play for the school. And then he said in his free time, he lifts weights and participates in fantasy football. So it looks like sports are pretty important to him. You guys as parents told me his strengths is that he's very smart and he does well academically and socially. And the school staff agrees with that. They have noticed too that he is very kind and accepting of others, and he's a very bright student. You both actually had some of the same educational concerns. After this diagnosis of his condition, and kind of before it, both you and the staff noticed that he was fatigued and kind of lacked some motivation, and it's affecting his mood, which the staff said it's not affecting his academic work, but it is affecting his social life a little bit. So that's where the mood comes in. And they wanted to note to the school staff that it's affecting his day-to-day academics, because his standardized test scores, he's above average in those. And so it's more his day-to-day with the fatigue, the focus, blurred vision, some of those symptoms that come with his condition are affecting his everyday work. So when we look at the next little section, the consideration of special factors, his behavior doesn't impede his learning or that of his peers. It only is really affecting his social life in school. And so we mark that as no, because it's not hurting anyone's learning. He does not have communication needs, and he does not require assistive technology, devices, or services, but he will need to bring his kit to school. We cannot provide that. And he does not have limited English proficiency, so we marked that as no as well. And then, so the next section, which is pretty important, is the present levels of academic academic achievement and functional performance. He did really well on the Woodcock Achievement Test. He has strengths in visual auditory learning, word identification, word comprehension, passage comprehension. So he's comprehending everything quite well. His one weakness was in letter identification, which he scored in the lowest percentile rank. And they have noticed that his teachers have noticed that he is having trouble reading in the general education classroom due to his blurred vision and fatigue at times. And some different fonts are difficult for Bailey to read too because of those symptoms. So based off of that, we created some measurable annual goals for Bailey, kind of in this section. And so the first one is, given the book, The Da Vinci Code, Bailey will read the book with 95% accuracy at 300 words per minute by May 21st, 2019. So that's the end of the school year. And we picked the Da Vinci Code because he said he loved historical fiction, and when we talked to him, he said he had read some Dan Brown books, but not that one. So we thought that would be a perfect fit for him and a good challenge. So we also created some short-term objectives, just kind of keep things in check. And so given half the chapters from the Da Vinci Code, Bailey will read the chapters with 95% accuracy at 250 words per minute. So we shortened that because we want him to build stamina as he works on his reading with his condition. And then the second measurable annual goal is, given a letter identification workbook, Bailey will complete the workbook with 95% accuracy as measured by a scoring sheet by May 21st, 2019. Again, the end of the school year. And a couple of short-term objectives for that one is, given cursive letter flashcards, Bailey will write the letters that are shown on a pre-lined sheet with 80% accuracy as measured by a scoring guide. So we will show him cursive writing cards and he will write them and copy them. And then given cursive letter flashcards again, Bailey will orally tell a teacher what each card says with 80% accuracy as measured by teacher observation. So we want him to practice writing them so he can understand, and then also be able to orally speak them to a teacher and identify those letters. So the next section, progress report frequency. The reports on these goals, we will provide them to you annually because we made them towards at the end of the school year. So we will just provide those reports then, and we will update you on the short-term objectives as well. And so the next section is least restrictive environment. And so the placement is based on the student's IEP. So we were considering that Bailey spend most of the time in general education, and during reading, he has an aide or goes into the special education classroom just to work on these letter identification, but go into the room at least maybe 2 to 3 times a week. So not all the time. We don't want him in the special education classroom all the time, just enough so we can work on the letter identification. And the next section, supplementary aids and services. So some accommodations and modifications we will make is flexibility with due dates of assignments. We realize there will be doctor's appointments and days that he is not feeling well enough to come to school, and so the teachers will be notified to extend due dates and such and not dock him for that because it's something out of his control. He cannot control it. So we just want flexibility with those, and we will provide adequate breaks throughout the day. We do realize he needs to drink and use the restroom more often than his peers will, and he needs to eat and check his sugar levels and everything. So we do understand that, and that's why we will give him as many breaks. And that's where it gets tricky because those breaks sometimes affect his schoolwork because he is missing class. So that's just something we're going to have to work with and work on throughout the school year and adapt. For the statewide assessments, we did put with accommodations. because he will need frequent breaks allowed, bathroom, eating, insulin, because a lot of these standardized tests, they give you a break at certain points, and we realize he's going to need more than that and when he needs it, so we did put that in there. We decided that extended school year services are not necessary for Bailey. He is not behind in academics by much, and so it's not necessary. And I believe that is all we have on there, besides some things for us to figure out. So with that being said, do you have any questions regarding the goals, regarding the short-term objectives or placement or aids or anything? Great. Okay, then I think that this concludes our IEP meeting. Before we leave, I would just like to mention that this is a draft. An IEP is a draft, and so it is ongoing, and it can always change. So if something's not going right or you want to reevaluate something, just let us know and we'll set up another meeting. We'll look at it again. This is not a set in stone document because we realize that Bailey's always going to be changing. And so his IEP needs to be able to be adjusted as well. So please feel free to contact us with any questions you have. If you don't think something looks right, come to us and we will work it out with you. Alrighty, thank you so much.